The area where I patrol in the Arizona border, we are more into the drug cartels and drug smuggling into the country. I can assure you I was there. I know what's happening. I've seen the way it's being handled, and our agents that are working these areas are more than professional.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of our YouTube channel here for the Local 2544, the largest local in the country. And I'm very excited today because we have Jim Calle here. He's one of our national attorneys, but you did start with this local originally, and you've seen all kinds of issues and all kinds of things, and I'm sure once you finally retire and you're gone from here, you're going to have a lot of stories for the rest of your life. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been doing this, Jim, and representing law enforcement as a whole.
Well, I graduated from law school in '93. I started representing law enforcement as part of my criminal defense practice back then. It was Tucson Police Department, Department of Public Safety, Pima County Sheriffs, and also Border Patrol.
Yeah, so you've been doing Border Patrol before you were hired by Border Patrol.
By
the union. Yeah, by the Border Patrol Union.
I've been doing like the critical incidents since 1989, full time. I mean, I was it for, since 1990, 24/7. I took a year off to go overseas for a while, but came back, and in 2007, you guys hired me to be the permanent lawyer for everything. So
and you haven't looked back. Haven't looked back ever since. No, and you've done a lot of cases, and you do. I know when we have shootings, I've responded with you. We've driven down there to these shootings. I think it's important that a lot of the membership out there really realize. I mean, obviously, there's other avenues besides the union that they could go to, but there's obvious differences. And I think what I've always spoken to the membership and people, I guess, in a way to recruit them, is also explain to them that we are there many times on scene before the disciplinary action comes forward. So I think that makes a big difference. And I mean, if you can elaborate a little bit of what's the difference between a lot of these other avenues that they have that they can use to ensure themselves in situations compared to ours.
I think number one, we have experience. I mean, obviously I've been doing this for a long time, a couple of decades. My experience includes about 150 critical incidents, almost all of which involve the use of deadly force. When we get a phone call from the Legal Defense Fund, we respond, and we respond immediately. Sometimes that means being on the phone and trying to reach out to the agents that are out in the field, but a lot of times it means getting in the car and starting the drive down to wherever the incident has taken place. We are often on scene before the investigators for this. We are often, in fact, I know of a number of cases where members who have joined apparently they're members of other organizations, union organizations, have made phone calls for representation, and no one ever shows up, ever. That does not happen with us. We are always there, always available.
Correct, and that's a big difference, especially when you're in the situation where you need help. Because we're all in situations where we need help, and it's good to have that safety blanket, I think, at all times. At the same time, there's incidences where individuals that are not members, and it's minimum how we assist them, but we can't send out an attorney because the dues are what pay you guys, and we can't send an attorney on non-union member situations. People need to understand that. One of the things that we want to concentrate on that happens is corruption. It could be greed, whatever. But in your experience, what do you think are the main causes of this?
It seems like, in terms of the cases that I've been involved with, a lot of the cases have arisen because of financial duress. Agents, despite the fact that they are some of the most well-paid employees in the state, get themselves into hock because they have too many cars, a couple houses, and in the end, they need additional money. And as a result, they suddenly become a little more open to the possibility of other avenues of generating income. And all of a sudden, it's in a bar, someone comes up to them, they happen to know they're a Border Patrol agent, ask them for a favor for $500. Let a load pass, ignore people coming across the fence. I mean, in some extreme examples, I'm aware of cases, or I think they might even still be being investigated.
Incidents
where people were placed into the back of Border Patrol vehicles at the border and driven north, and then released, for money.
Right.
And the problem with corruption is any little favor, any little payment, you're now owned by the organization. You can never get out. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think it's a one-time thing and they can say no. You can never say no.
Right, and I used to realize that from my experience before I joined the patrol. I worked for the Arizona State Prison, and that was always something that they stressed on. You know, once an inmate would hook you, you're hooked. It's hard to get out of those situations. Obviously, we have situations that occur, and we don't condone them, but we do assist agents when they're in time of need. And you've helped many agents. And what do you think are some of these incidences where agents can lose their job, because that's always there when they get involved in off-duty situations, or what is it that can cause them to lose their job?
Probably the single biggest cause of agents losing their job is lack of candor. And I have to say that those cases typically are sad in the sense that the underlying incident that gave rise to the case in the first place was something that was easily resolvable, or something that would have been taken care of with a relatively minor sanction.
Correct.
And yet the agent panics, they start to tell, relate facts that aren't true, sometimes to an initial supervisor, sometimes in a memo, and then sometimes also to investigating agents. And it will always result in a lack of candor charge, and lack of candor charges are always removal cases.
Right, we also have, I know you've dealt with some of these individuals on their backgrounds, where stuff comes up on their backgrounds, and obviously things have not been thoroughly investigated, or perhaps there's more questions that need to be asked. What's your experience with some of these background investigations?
One of the things that happens is an agent goes through an initial background and they complete a questionnaire, and sometimes the Personnel Security Division of Internal Affairs finds out that some of that information is incorrect, and that results in an investigation. But another variety of that is that an agent completes the questionnaire and initial background, and they're good to go. And then 5 years later, 6 years later, whenever the subsequent background investigation comes up, they complete a questionnaire again, and they're not careful, and their answers are not the same. And suddenly they're now in an investigation, and the first thing out of the mouths of the investigators are, why did you lie? Why did you lie on your subsequent questionnaire, or the initial one, because these two don't make sense. And that can get agents in a lot of trouble as well.
So best course of action is tell the truth.
Tell the truth and pay attention. Make sure you retain all copies of every document you've ever submitted for your background, and make reference to them every time you have to do a subsequent questionnaire.
DUIs, Jim. I know that's been a lot of talk, obviously here at our local. I know they talk about it at the national level, but obviously here within our local, and we always get the same question: is how come we don't cover DUIs? It's an off-duty incident, of course, but it's a big deal. And a lot of agents, especially hiring agents from out of state, it's difficult for them to understand that the laws in Arizona are a lot different, a lot stricter than other states, and potentially losing their jobs. So can you elaborate a little bit more on losing their jobs from domestic violences, from DUIs and stuff like that? Because they just need to know these things.
I mean, DUIs, this is an area where I could probably spend an entire day just giving a seminar, on DUIs. But the bottom line is this: Arizona has some of the toughest laws in the nation. You can go up to Washington and get a couple of DUIs, and not a lot's going to happen to you. In Arizona, on a first offense, you're looking at substantial fines. You're looking at an automatic suspension of your license for 3 months. You're looking at the fact that you're going to have an order mandating that you have an ignition interlock device on all vehicles, not just your personal vehicle, on all vehicles. There used to be an exception for work vehicles. That was taken away by the state legislature 2 years ago. So that has now resulted in an order that's essentially telling the government, look, this guy can't drive unless he has ignition interlock on your vehicle. The result, as some people know, is that automatically becomes a removal case, a condition of employment. You can't drive a government vehicle with ignition interlock, so you can't meet the conditions of employment. They seek your removal. With DUIs too, they're onerous in the sense of how expensive they are. Even absent the use of an attorney, you're looking at least $5,000 to $8,000. And if you look at the use of an attorney, you can just double that. So the cost is enormous in immediate fees. The cost is even worse when you look at the loss of pay that an agent suffers, because ultimately they're looking at typically 3 to 6 months of having to take leave without pay.
Well, we did the math.
To survive.
We actually did the math earlier, and I believe we came out to an average of $40,000 that you're going to be either missing money or what you're going to pay out. In the end, it's a cost of close to $40,000 to the agent for a DUI.
And everyone really needs to think about this. $40,000 that you can lose versus $15 you might pay to Uber to get a long ride home. Which do you want to do? The difficulty with DUIs is that no one ever knows where that line is. No one, I mean, there's so many factors involved. No one can tell me they know when they are intoxicated or not intoxicated. No one should ever take the chance of doing that. You also mentioned domestic violence. Law enforcement is inherently a stressful job. Often this results in stressful home lives. The problem with domestic violence is that a fight, a normal fight can escalate and suddenly become a criminal offense. You fight too loud, that's disorderly conduct. You break a door, you punch a hole in the wall, that's criminal damage.
Throw a phone. You throw a phone against the wall, even though you're the owner of the phone.
Yes, because it's community property, that becomes criminal damage. They're all labeled as domestic violence because it took place in the home. Domestic violence is a job killer. You will lose your weapon under federal law, and you cannot be an agent, and you will lose your job.
Jim, before we close, there's something that affects this local a lot. And you constantly get the agents that ask, and there's always new agents that come in, and we get the same question. We get swaps that come in, transfers. The famous camp situation. I know you handled the arbitration, and you were involved with that. Can you pretty much explain to the agents out there what the deal is with the camps and where the agency themselves is really not violating any policy?
It comes down to a simple fact. There's a federal law that details, when a person gets and what's the type of pay?
Per diem.
Well, not the per diem, but they want it's not the overtime pay, it's the
standby pay?
Standby pay, right, standby pay. Under federal law, a person is only entitled to standby pay when they are mandated to work, which is what happens at camp, and when they stay in their off-duty hours, and this is the important part, when they are consistently and routinely called from off-duty hours and put back on duty. Only in those circumstances, under the law, do agents qualify for the standby pay. As a result, as everyone knows that goes to camps, that just doesn't happen. In 10 years of doing this, I've only heard of one instance where that's ever happened. So as a result, that's why agents don't get standby pay.
And we fought this, it's gone through.
Yes.
The laws have looked at it, everyone's looked at it, and we're where we're at right now.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the courts have said that they've looked at the situation and they've said, if you're unhappy with this, you can't say that you're a slave or something like that, because in the end, you can quit and get another job.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate, but that's where we're at. The law is the law. We have to enforce the laws, and at the same time, we had to adhere to
Follow
the laws.
them.
And the arbitration hearing, I know it's put in several of the stations at the union board, so if you guys have any more issues on that or questions, please refer to that. It's up on the boards. And in closing, thank you very much for being on here. Thank you everyone out there for listening to us and watching the show. And if you have any ideas, let us know. Very, very, very helpful, Jim. I'm very appreciative of you being on here.
Thanks
I
for
know
having me.
a lot of the agents needed it, and it's very nice to have you on board. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Have a safe rest of the day.